in order. This is, I think, the 12th meeting of the House of Commons Standing Committee, and we have before us Mr. Jones, Mr. Scott Jones, who's head of the Center for Cybersecurity and has appeared before this committee quite a number of times, I would say. And I just, before I ask you for your opening remarks, I just wanted to compliment you on your report. If the standard of report is its accessibility, I thought that the report that you produced was actually quite accessible, particularly for people like ourselves who are not particularly expert in the field. So I want to thank you for that. And I also want to take note that it is a strange, not a strange echo, but as an echo from the NCCOP report submitted by Mr. McGuinty, and there was a letter that was hopefully circulated to members after the last meeting. So with that, I just want to welcome Mr. Jones for his 7 minutes and thank him again for being available to us.
Well, thank you very much for that, Mr. Chair, and good afternoon, committee members. Thank you for the invitation to appear today to discuss cybersecurity and specifically the National Cyber Threat Assessment released on November 18th. As the head of the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity at the Communications Security Establishment, it's a pleasure to be here. And CSE is Canada's foreign intelligence agency and lead technical and operational agency for cybersecurity, and as was mentioned, I have appeared here a few times before. Created in 2018, the Cyber Centre is a unified source of expert advice, guidance, and support on cybersecurity operational matters. We work closely with other government agencies, industry partners, and with the public to improve cybersecurity for Canadians and to make Canada more resilient against cyber threats. Our goal with the National Cyber Threat Assessment is not to frighten Canadians or be downers, but rather to inform all of us about the threats we will be facing in the coming years. And I hope that it spurs many of us to take a simple action and in simple actions to protect ourselves. We have seen that easy, simple actions can greatly increase our individual security. Canada is one of the most connected countries in the world, which the NCTA highlights. And the COVID-19 pandemic has accelerated our reliance on the internet to meet basic needs. We are increasingly leading our lives online, and at the same time, threat actors continue to pursue new ways to use the internet for malicious purposes. While this assessment does not provide specific mitigation advice, more guidance and best practices can be found on the Cyber Centre's website and through our Get Cyber Safe public awareness campaign. And as I've said before, by taking even a single action, all Canadians can help shape and sustain our nation's cyber resilience. For those Canadians who would like to learn more, we have also published an updated introduction to the cyber threat environment, which I will confess I may slip and call the Cyber Primer, where we explain many of the terms and techniques used in cybersecurity. The assessment analyzes cyber trends since 2018 and draws upon the Cyber Centre's unique view of the cyber threat environment to forecast those trends into around 2022. The assessment also highlights the most relevant cyber threats to Canadian individuals and organizations. Before I discuss those threats further, though, I would note that the assessment's findings are based on reporting from multiple classified and unclassified sources, including those related to CSE's foreign intelligence mandate. While the Cyber Centre must protect classified sources and methods, we have tried to provide readers with as much information as possible, including footnotes. I'll now provide a brief breakdown of the Cyber Centre's key findings regarding the cyber threat landscape. Broadly, these can be grouped into 3 key observations for our discussion today. The NCTA 2020 highlights several key observations. First, cybercrime is the most likely threat to impact Canadians now and in the years ahead, and cyber criminals often succeed because they exploit human and social behaviors. Second, ransomware, directed at Canada, will almost certainly continue to target large enterprises and critical infrastructure providers. And finally, while cybercrime is the main threat, state-sponsored cyber programs of China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran pose a strategic threat to Canada. First, we assess that cybercrime remains the most likely threat to impact Canadians. Now and in the years ahead, Canadian individuals and organizations will continue to face online fraud and attempts to steal personal, financial, and corporate information. Cyber criminals often succeed because they exploit deeply rooted human behaviors and social patterns, as well as technological vulnerabilities. Unfortunately, as a result of this reality, Canadians are more at risk to cybercrime than ever. And this has only increased during the COVID-19 pandemic. Malicious cyber actors are able to take advantage of people's heightened levels of fear to lure and encourage victims to visit fake websites, open email attachments, and click on links that contain malware. These website emails and links frequently impersonate health organizations or the Government of Canada. Defending Canadians against these threats requires addressing both the technical and social elements of cyber threat activity. Second, the ongoing safety of Canadians depends on critical infrastructure as well as consumer and medical goods, many of which are increasingly being connected to the internet by their manufacturers. However, once connected, these infrastructures and goods are susceptible to cyber threats, and maintaining their security requires investments over time from manufacturers and owners that can be difficult to sustain. We have assessed that ransomware directed at Canada will continue to target those large enterprises and critical infrastructure providers because these entities cannot tolerate sustained disruptions. They are often willing to pay up to millions of dollars to quickly restore their operations. Many Canadian victims will likely continue to give in to ransom domains due to the severe costs of losing business and rebuilding their networks and the potential consequences of refusing payment. The protection of these organizations and networks is crucial to the productivity and competitiveness of Canadian companies and vital for Canada's national defense. Finally, state-sponsored actors are very likely attempting to develop cyber capabilities to disrupt Canadian critical infrastructure to further their goals. However, we judge that it is very unlikely that the cyber threat actors will intentionally seek to disrupt critical infrastructure and cause major damage or loss of life in the absence of international hostilities. Nevertheless, cyber threat actors may target Canadian critical organizations to collect information, pre-position for future activities, or as a form of intimidation. While cybercrime is the most likely threat to impact the average Canadian, state-sponsored cyber programs of China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran pose the greatest strategic threat to Canada. We have assessed that state-sponsored actors will almost certainly continue to attempt to steal Canadian intellectual property, proprietary information, in today's context, information specifically related to COVID-19. We have also assessed that online foreign influence campaigns are no longer limited to key political events, such as election periods. They are now the new normal. Adversaries now look to sustain their influence campaigns across all levels of discourse deemed to be of strategic value. While Canadians are often lower priority targets for online foreign influence activity, our media ecosystem is closely intertwined with that of the United States and other allies, which means that when their populations are targeted, Canadians become exposed to online influence as well. I want to reassure you that CSE and the Cyber Centre are working hard to mitigate many of these threats and protect Canadians and their interests through targeted advice and guidance. CSE continues to leverage all aspects of its mandate to help ensure that Canada is protected against threats. The National Cyber Threat Assessment is not only meant to inform Canadians, but is also setting the priorities for action by the Cyber Centre. What actions can we take, often with partners in the private sector who are willing to stand up and assist to directly address these threats facing each of us? A key example of this type of partnership is the Canadian Shield initiative from the Canadian Internet Registration Authority, or CIRA. CIRA Canadian Shield is a free protected DNS service that prevents you from connecting to malicious websites that might infect your device or steal your personal information. The service is provided by the Canadian Internet Registration Authority, a not-for-profit agency that manages the .ca internet domain. The service uses threat intelligence from the Canadian Centre for Cybersecurity. And in simple terms, if someone is using Canadian Shield, clicks on a link that is known to be malicious, they will be stopped from going to that bad site. And CIRA has seen a number of Canadians pick up of using this tool, although we would certainly like to see it accelerated more. We are just past the 6-month mark. And we do recommend that all Canadians take advantage of this free service built by Canadians for Canadians and designed to protect Canadians' privacy. And through targeted advice and guidance, the Cyber Centre is helping to protect Canadian cybersecurity interests. We are dedicated to advancing cybersecurity and increasing the confidence of Canadians in the systems they rely on. We hope that this report will help raise the bar in terms of awareness of today's cyber threats. And I encourage Canadians who are looking for easy steps to follow on tips to follow on cybersecurity, such as our holiday gift guide, to visit our website at getcybersafe.ca. For businesses and larger organizations, or if you would like to read more of the publications of the Cyber Centre, we can be found at cyber.gc.ca. And thank you again for the opportunity to appear before you virtually today, and I'll be pleased to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Jones. For the first 6-minute round, I have Madame Stubbs, Mr. Lightbound, Madame Michaud, and Mr. Harris in that order. So, Madame Stubbs, 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the witness for being here, for your time, for your report, and for all of your work. It's eye-opening and deeply alarming. So I think we're all glad that you're there. You touched on this in your comments and also in your report about the costs of foreign hacking for Western companies and governments, to the tune of individual Canadians even losing over $43 million to cybercrime fraud in 2019, according to those statistics from the Canadian Anti-Fraud Centre. I just wonder if you could explain to us what costs the criminals and the foreign state-sponsored actors who engage in foreign interference in our democracy and society face. And I wonder if you have any comments on whether or not they seem to act with relative impunity without any serious risk of cost to their actions.
Well, thank you for the question, Mr. Chair, and thank you for the comments on the report. I think there are a few things. If we look at cyber criminals, it's very much an extremely developed ecosystem that they rely upon, that relies on things like anonymous financial transactions, so Bitcoin and the like, where you have online digital currencies, and that really does facilitate. In terms of the risk, it's certainly a question that I wish one of my colleagues from the RCMP were here to talk about this in terms of prosecutions, but it remains a challenging environment where you can achieve this the fraud against a Canadian from remote jurisdictions. And as the report points out, there are many jurisdictions where you will not suffer consequences from local authorities because as long as you don't target their citizens, they're not going to go after you. There's a bit of a quid pro quo that seems to exist and certainly has been highlighted in some of the research. In terms of some of the costs, we do try to impose costs. The government has done a number of attributions to call out state activity that we feel is crossing thresholds and crossing lines. So we called out earlier this year Russia for their activity against vaccine research companies. And we certainly have joined in with our allies on a number of those. That was one where we did jointly with the United Kingdom and the United States, specifically because it was targeting our areas. But we have called out all 4 of the nations I mentioned at some point or joined with our allies in calling out that behavior.
Right. Could you expand on that, actually, the importance of attribution and exposing their intent? And then also, I don't know if you have any other comments on what could be other options to fight back, like sanctions or other tools.
Well, so the value of attribution is pretty variable. The primary value from me as a cyber defender and somebody who's worried about cybersecurity is it spurs action. So when we tend to do an attribution, it gets organizations to take seriously the alerts we put out. So when we say you need to apply this patch, it's important, people will respond. When we say apply this patch because of country X is targeting this sector, they pay attention and they do it. So it does have an effect domestically in terms of getting the potential victims to take it seriously and to take action. In terms of the international side, we certainly have not seen a significant change in the actors' behavior because of it, but it does form norms, which is something that is probably more appropriate for my global affairs colleagues to talk about, and they're probably better positioned to talk about some of the things like sanctions and other aspects of foreign policy. I tend to try to stick to the technical and the cybersecurity elements.
Okay, thank you. On page 23 in your report and in the comments you made and you already gave an example like the Canadian Shield that you talked about. On page 23, you noted that ransomware frequently targets health organizations and that it's ramped up during COVID-19. On page 25, you talked about supply chain vulnerabilities. So I just wonder if you can comment on the Canadian government now mounting a massive COVID-19 vaccine distribution campaign and what measures are or could be or will be taken to ensure that the distribution supply chain is protected from malicious cyber actors. And in addition to that, are you confident that suppliers, logistic operators, health clinics also have robust enough cyber security measures in place?
Thank you for that question. There's a lot there. We have been working since the beginning to build up the resiliency of the healthcare community. So one of the things we have been working on, and we've done this in partnership with the provinces and territories that clearly have such an important role to play in healthcare, in terms of providing advice and guidance, targeted briefings targeted information specifically to that healthcare sector to build the resiliency over time. We knew we were going to arrive at a vaccine at some point. So to build up the resiliency, make sure that the information flows are in place, but also ensure that they have the information they need to proactively take steps to protect themselves. And we've done that through things like we have published our other threat assessments that are specifically for the health sector, but then we've taken that and on regular weekly calls, we go over any threat we're seeing and how it could apply to the health sector and what could be done about that. So we're trying to very much build up resiliency before something happens. In terms of the current rollout of the vaccine, we are working with obviously our colleagues at the Public Health Agency and the overall task force to make sure that that information is in the hands of any organization that would be part of this to make sure that we're taking actions earlier. And then of course we do leverage our foreign intelligence mandate. So if we do see things that are happening in foreign space and our group of allies around the world, not just necessarily the Five Eyes, but we have a lot of allies in cybersecurity where we all look and share information very quickly to make sure that we're getting that information out. Our goal is that it's not to observe the problem, it's to give anybody who's a potential victim something that they can do to protect themselves. And that's been really our goal. So we continue to look for new ways that we can build up our cyber resiliency in this space.
Thank you, Madame Stubbs. Mr. Lightbound, 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Jones, for being here, and thank you for your report, which is indeed troubling, but at the same time quite simple for someone who's not so well versed in this area. My first question is regarding critical infrastructure that you refer to in the report. What is your judgment of Canada's situation in terms of our managers of critical infrastructures? What are the risks in terms of cybersecurity, and what is your centre doing to raise awareness and further raise awareness? Thank you.
Well, thank you for that question, Mr. Chair, and actually, that's a really great question. I'm glad to get the opportunity to address this. We've been working with Canada's critical infrastructure providers for quite a while. Now we do have to concentrate on the ones that are most at risk. So when we talk about the electrical sector in this report, that's a sector where we have been working to build both the relationships we need across the country, but also with energy providers such as the Canadian Electrical Association to make sure that we're addressing cyber threats proactively. Over a year ago, one of the things I did was I participated in the tabletop exercise to simulate what would happen in an event where there was a cybersecurity incident, just to make sure that we're prepared and that we had gone through and hadn't seen any, there were no gaps in the process. So we continuously are looking to improve here. This is an area where the technology changes are something that the sector is very aware of. They're very much a resiliency based. They understand, so they're used to dealing with things like major weather events, etc. Cybersecurity can be looked at. It's just a different source of the same type of impact. And so they're organizations that understand risk, resiliency, and it's a very easy conversation. So we are working closely with them. We're looking to address the threats. We're looking to see how we can expand into not only just proactive cybersecurity, but discovery of threats before they manifest on the network. And we're looking for some joint projects. One of the areas we really like to concentrate on is innovation at the Cyber Center. And we do that collaboratively, though. We do that collaboratively by bringing in partners from the energy sector, their suppliers, and we say, can we tackle these problems together? So if it is the convergence of operational technology, how can we work with themselves, other leaders in industry, and say, how can we detect when there's a threat or when there's somebody targeting and proactively deal with it? One of our goals is to make sure that that is shared sector-wide from coast to coast to coast with every provider, so that while one might fall victim, we don't want it to be two. So get that information out quickly, and information sharing is also an important piece here for when something is hitting, that others can be inoculated against the threat as well.
Merci.
Thank you very much. That's a very thorough answer, and I think that the center is playing an important role with developing that partnership with the critical infrastructure providers. You talked about the Canadian Shield. I'm not exactly sure of the term, but can you give us any figures about that shield and how it's helping Canadians?
So I can. It's really the Canadian Internet Registration Authority's project, and I'm hoping I'm not scooping them. But they did advise us that earlier this week that we have crossed over 100,000 Canadians using the service. That's a good number, not as much as I would honestly like, because it does offer a significant boost in all the privacy information. I do understand that one of the things we really thought about when we worked with them on the service was for the government to be at arm's length. We didn't want it to look like there was a potential that we were collecting information on Canadians. That's not our mandate. That's certainly not within our law that governs us. But there's also a privacy assessment that went along with it. So I'm hoping that Canadians, as they do some look into this, see what's out there. We did have commentary from privacy experts in industry talk about this program and how it's designed. Well, I'm hoping that will more Canadians, as they become aware, will grab onto this, because it is a way that every Canadian can do something to protect themselves, and it's something that is silent and in the background. For me, the way I describe it is it means, we're all worried that we're going to make that one mistake and click on that one link on an email, and it's going to have devastating consequences. The goal with Canadian Shield and what we've tried to do is make sure that if you click, it's not that devastating consequence, because it'll be blocked, and that's kind of what it does.
I see I have a minute left. You mentioned in your report 4 specific countries that are a source of risk, including China. What are the factors you take into account to actually name those countries as opposed to others? Thank you.
That's a great question. I was really hoping somebody would ask me. It wasn't an easy decision, naming countries, because it immediately draws the attention from the report, from all the other aspects of the report, to the 4 countries named. But in reality, we had the government of Canada, we had called out at some point, we'd attributed malicious cyber activity to one of these 4, or we joined allies. And so it was they were the logical 4. They're also the 4 that have demonstrated the capabilities that we mentioned in terms of the risk to Canada. And so we thought, well, on one hand, it draws the attention away from some of the things we would like to talk about, which is it is very easy for a 5th country and a 6th country to appear on that list. On the other hand, we need to acknowledge the fact that these 4 countries are out there and they are representing significant strategic risk to Canada, and with their capabilities and what they're able to do. So that was some of the discussion. But obviously, one of the things I've said is that the decision to name is more from a cybersecurity perspective. We certainly support this, but it is really in alignment with foreign affairs and foreign policy.
I'm going to have to leave it there, Mr. Lightbound. Madame Michaud, 6 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Jones, for coming here and for your very interesting report and worrisome report. I think that the public in general is not particularly aware about the risk cybersecurity presents and the cyber threats you mentioned in your report. You talked about stealing personal information and also the physical risks for Canadians and Quebecers. So how can Canadians protect themselves? Is there a duty to educate, to raise awareness at different levels of government? Because this is an area that evolves very quickly. As you mentioned, we're all very connected, dependent on all the technology. With COVID-19, we're all working using all these devices. So how can we further raise the awareness of Canadians and protect ourselves? Thank you.
Well, thank you for that question. I think there's a few things I'm a little concerned that the report is meant to inform. We're hoping not to scare. And so the fact is, because we believe that fear doesn't really motivate Canadians in the most cases to take action. But what we are hoping is that we can give Canadians simple things they can do to help themselves be secure online. So Get Cyber Safe is a great source for that. whether the Twitter account or the online account. But there are some really easy things that we would like to ask Canadians to do, and one of those is passwords. We've seen the number one password in Canada remains password. The number two password is 123456, and that's from a report, and that's pretty common worldwide. That just leaves it open, and it makes it easy for the cyber threat actors. Basic things like that, and I know passwords are a nightmare for all of us, but that's something basic like that can actually really strengthen cybersecurity. The second easy thing for people to do is really to just turn on auto updates. So instead of having to install the updates manually on your phone, on your computer, just say auto update. That also raises the bar for cybersecurity. We find in the last year or the last number of years, it is still the basic out-of-date systems that are causing most of the cybersecurity breaches. And so those two things are simple. But to your point, for small and medium enterprises, what we've tried to do is also prepare a guide of simple, straightforward things that a small and medium organization can do, because they don't need to be, they shouldn't be cybersecurity experts. And that's our guidance for small and medium enterprises. And we designed that specifically to be 20% of the effort for 80% of the benefit of what we would do from, say, a enterprise grade cybersecurity program that exists. And so trying to do things that are practical, pragmatic, and then we do things that are fun, like the holiday gift guide, etc., at this time of year, to try and hopefully help Canadians to make some good online security choices.
Merci. Je vais...
Thank you. I will certainly share this holiday gift guide. It's a good idea and a good way to educate our constituencies. And coming back to the small and medium, even large businesses that could be at risk, we know that small businesses might hesitate. I'm thinking of ransomware. They would hesitate before contacting a lawyer. They'll just pay up. You yourself in the report mention this, and there are articles in the media of small businesses being the victims of ransomware. Maybe insurance companies or legal experts who are better informed could help more. But what role can the federal government play in this role? And again, to inform, like your center does, are there any government programs that could be implemented or any legislative changes? As we're told, things are evolving very quickly. What could the role of federal government be? Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for the question. I think there's a few things. Certainly, embarrassment and shame is preventing organizations from reporting, and the potential loss of business. We tend in cybersecurity, unfortunately, we punish the victim and not the perpetrator in our actions as citizens. We tend to shift away, and so there's an incentive for an organization to not admit when they're victims of cybersecurity. Then there's the second piece where there is embarrassment because it usually involved a mistake. Sometimes it's not patching, but a lot of times it's I clicked on something I shouldn't have. And that's something that we just have to begin to destigmatize and make people aware. You can get fooled. Some of the cyber criminal aspects, I believe it's only a matter of time before I'm going to click on something because some of them are so well done. And so if me and my job knows that, nobody else should be feeling shame for it. I will probably be embarrassed when I click, but I'll get over it. But lastly, I think some of the things that we have seen are, we do see indications that insurance is actually telling organizations not to report, to not go to police. And that makes it a very challenging aspect to respond, but also to get accurate statistics so we know where to apply our resources to the threat. So if we want to start to work on a particular version of cybercrime, without knowing what's hitting Canadians, where do we start? Cybercrime is a worldwide global enterprise, unfortunately, but what's targeting Canadians is where we should be putting our attention. And that's a challenge for both ourselves and the RCMP. It's that Canadian organizations just simply are not reporting for whatever reason. It could be from the embarrassment all the way up to being advised to not report and pay the ransom to get back online.
Joe, Mr. Harris, 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Jones, for coming before us today. And there's a very
sobering report, I shall say. Some encouragement that we can do some things ourselves. And I'd like to ask you first about the CIRA Canadian Shield, which you call a free protected DNS service that prevents you from connecting to malicious websites. First of all, just for the uninitiated like me, and I first heard of this today, by the way, so thank you very much for that. What is a DNS service, for one? And for two, do you have all of your devices connect using this CIRA Canadian Shield yourself in your personal devices?
Yeah, absolutely. So happy to answer that. So first of all, DNS, the internet works on kind of a series of numbers, and we go to www.website.com, but the internet doesn't understand what that is. DNS translates that to the actual address on the internet, which is called an IP address. And so really it tells the internet how to route itself and how to get to the location. And that's something that cyber crime actors take advantage of. So when you click on a link, if you were going to impersonate the Cyber Center, for example, you might create a domain or a website that would say cyber.gcca. Might miss the dot, so fool Canadians, they wouldn't see it. That's something that's called typo squatting. And then they would go to something that looks like the Cyber Center website, except you're downloading malware when you're there. And so what a DNS firewall does is it says, hey, that's actually been blocked as an illegitimate site. So when you click, you don't go there. And so it stops you from having the consequence of either the mistyping address or the deliberate. In terms of me using these, I absolutely do. I put them on my personal devices because, frankly, it gives me a level of protection. I admit it's only a matter of time before something happens and I click. I want to make sure I'm protected with every level that I can.
Okay, all right, well, thank you. It was good enough for you, it's good enough for me, and I think it should be good enough for lots of people to take advantage of that. So thanks for that. I'm one step further to being more secure. Let me ask you a question about the whole issue of ransomware. You say it's still going to be a continuing threat, and leaving aside the ransom part of it, the capability of shutting down someone's access to the internet, that itself seems to me to be a threat. And any individual or criminal or state that has access to that capability has that as part of its, shall we say, its list of weapons that it can use in hostilities. And surely it must be considered a threat that must be defended against by government, by any country who wishes to defend itself, just as we would defend ourselves with anti-aircraft capabilities, etc. Is Canada protected from that kind of threat to not just critical infrastructure like electrical systems, but banks or hospitals, medical access to medical information that might be needed to treat patients, things that could shut down not just the economy, but activity in general?
Well, and thanks for that question. I think there's a few things we talk about in the security realm. We talk about confidentiality, so protecting the information itself, then the availability, and then the integrity of what's being transmitted so that you can't change it en route. And you're really talking about availability, and I think that's such an important question. So there's a few techniques that would be used. If you're looking to take, say, for example, take me offline right now as I'm talking, you could do something like a distributed denial of service attack. So just overwhelm my internet connection so that it doesn't know what's good traffic and bad. And that's something where there are very robust mitigations in place. Canada's telcos have for years been able to defend against this. There are DDoS attacks that happen on the internet constantly that we just don't know about because they are so well defended. And then you have things that will target specific elements of infrastructure. So, and that's usually taking advantage of a vulnerability, and that could be flooding, overwhelming it.
Can we just focus on this ransomware capability?
Yep.
So you shut down somebody's access, then you shut it down, and so that's a particular capability. Never mind the ransom. So, are there countries or operations who can do that en masse, and are we vulnerable to that as a nation throughout? And if we are, do we have any defense against that?
So ransomware typically doesn't work in that way. It's typically used to target, and then it's holding something for hostage. So whether you're holding your data for hostage by taking it away from taking it out of your system, and then using that to say, hey, if you don't pay me, I'm going to release this information. Or it could be encrypting your data, making it unavailable to you. And they tend to do that. It tends to be done on a organization by organization basis. In terms of like a mass ransomware type of thing, so we saw that we have seen where ransomware will propagate. And we saw some examples where it impacted a company like Maersk Shipping, for example, and it was ransomware and the National Health Service in the UK, where ransomware started to propagate and get out of control. The defenses against that is really that you start to block the infected systems and you start to do a containment model. At the same time, you start to then share the information and inoculate. So there are responses in place and there are things that can be done to protect against it. And the worldwide community is pretty adept at dealing with it. But that doesn't mean that there's not victims of consequence during that process.
So you still think that someone could use that in an organized and coordinated or massive way to attack a country or a country's enterprises, whether it be a hospital or whatever?
We're going to have to leave it there. Mr. Harris is over his time. Mr. Motz, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Scott, or Mr. Jones, for being here again. I always appreciate the level of expertise you bring to the field, and thank you again for the great service that CSE provides to Canadians. Scott, you've mentioned and previously appeared before this committee talking about our approach to protect our mobile and telecommunications systems and networks, namely through a system similar to the UK model, where they inspected everything before it was even installed. As you know, the UK has moved away from that model, going so far as to reverse their decision to allow Huawei in light of security issues raised by the security teams in their government. Now, Huawei, which we all know falls under the Chinese state-controlled company because of their security laws, cannot be safely used in Canada, according to various and all basically that I've ever seen independent experts. So is your team still working on a recommendation for the minister on Huawei, or have you already briefed the minister and provided advice on the best way forward with respect to this company?
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. I think one of the things we really, it's really important is my role here is to advise and implement on policy. And that policy decision is still before the government and the elected officials. So I've got to be kind of careful not to take away our. It's not my goal. I'm not elected, so I really respect.
No, I appreciate that, Mr. Jones. But I guess based on that answer, I would say that you have already provided that briefing, and if you have, thank you for doing that. I'm sure that's something that will go a long way to make the decision. Your report highlights in many parts the use of indirect attacks to gain access to desired systems, going after suppliers, business partners, clients, governments, all with the intent of gaining access to a particular target. Now, we also know that China is one of those countries that have been identified in, by various security agencies across our country and other countries. It would seem counterproductive to have the system that transfers all of our information, namely the internet, controlled by a company that falls under the thumb of a country focused on theft, misinformation, espionage, and disruption. So can you help me and Canadians understand why we still don't have an answer on Huawei?
Again,
you've asked twice for an official of the government to comment upon the decision of the cabinet, and I think Mr. Jones declined to answer that question the first time. He should probably decline to answer that question the second time.
I appreciate your intervention, Chair. Please take that time off of my 5 minutes. That'll be great.
I'm always generous with your time, Mr. Mott.
Well, not as generous as you are with Mr. Harris, but hopefully today will be one of those days.
Yes, he does very well, Jones, I have to say. Yeah.
You've testified before that you were looking at how to manage security products, and this is really key on a global supply chains and rolling software updates. That was something that you focused on at one of your last times you were with us, and that was September of 2018. It's been 2 years. Have you come to any any resolution on securing hardware and software that brings rise to this concern?
Well, that's a fairly in-depth question, but happy to try to answer it. I think there's a few elements. So certainly, the broader internet and the broader aspect that we face in terms of technology is that it is a global supply chain, and there are a number of vulnerabilities that are in the software. So there's a few things that we're pursuing. The first one is really about building up the layers of security and the work that we're doing with various industries. So in the context of the electrical infrastructure in Canada, one of the things we are looking for is to build in security, but also not just in the product themselves, and looking at it from very much a similar approach to what would have done in the safety world for their equipment as well. But also now, how do we watch and monitor with them that equipment to make sure that it's operating as expected? And so it's a build it to be as secure as possible, knowing that there's likely to be vulnerability, and then how do you watch to make sure that it's operating as expected so that you can respond quickly, and then building in a response capability as well. And so in the industry, we call that managed detection and response, but it's really about understanding that nothing is invulnerable anymore. It is just the systems are just, they're flawed no matter where they're built. And
so
how
it
do
would
we
be
liberate?
So it would be fair to say that we can't say that we are secure. It's a permanent battle would be a fair assessment, and we have to be vigilant, moving forward. So I guess it then would make sense that we would want to, only use supplies from trusted countries. That would make sense. I have a question. You've appeared before NSECOP as well, and as you know, we tabled a report recently detailing serious concerns around foreign interference and influence in Canada, and that China played a role in those concerns. We've been deemed, as a country, we've been deemed to be an attractive and permissive target, according to that report. From your perspective,
Mr. Motz, I'm stopping the clock.
No, this is a question specifically about
I just
what do we need to do to change that?
Okay, I just want to be cautious about whatever questions or answers or deliberations NSECOP takes place. That is in fact a committee of parliamentarians that are sworn to a high level of secrecy, like yourself. And I just want to make sure they're going to stay within those guardrails. We know that guardrails are an important thing to stay within these days.
Guardrails are very, very important. I don't want to go to jail for my guardrails. It was what was tabled in their NSECOP report.
Okay.
So it's already made public. So from that report, Scott, you've read it. What do we need to do as a country to stop or change being such an easy target? Like as I said, we're an attractive and permissive target. What do we need to do different to fix that?
Well, thanks for the question. I think there's a challenge I face here, because for me, my goal really is cybersecurity. So in terms of raising the cybersecurity bar in this space, one of the things that we're encouraging all Canadians to do is to frankly take some steps to raise that bar across the country in terms of just some basic security elements. There are some easy steps that can be taken that would increase our security bar. I mentioned them earlier, but basic hygiene, meaning patching our systems, would have a huge effect on our industry and on cybersecurity. And so that immediately makes us less vulnerable to outside activities and outside exploitation. The second piece really is that when we go on and we're looking at some of the applications and technologies that are out there, going in with a basis that's not just based on the cost. The lowest cost product isn't always the best one. Sometimes looking and saying what's important in terms of security and looking how to measure those, and that's a challenge we all face. I know we all want a good deal, it's particularly as we're heading into the holiday season and looking for gifts. But in a lot of times, technology that's cheap is technology that will be out of date and it will not be updated and patched.
We'll have to leave it there, unfortunately. Mr. Motz, you are well over time. Madame Cara, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Jones, for being here and for your report and all the incredible work that you do. Maybe I'll pick up where my friend, my colleague Christina left off in terms of your report noted that the vast majority of cyber incidents in Canada occurred because there were simple or basic elements of cybersecurity that weren't followed. In other words, this was completely preventable. What steps can the Cyber Center take to further increase awareness and compliance to ensure that Canadians are taking the appropriate steps to protect themselves? What can my constituents do? And what is the responsibility of businesses, individuals, and the government?
Well, thank you. That's an excellent question, and I think the for Canadians, I don't want it to sound like we're blaming Canadians for this, because it isn't easy, and no, nor do I want to blame businesses. The problem with the technology world is that we've made it too hard for businesses to keep it up to date, and a small business owner should not also have to be a firewall expert and a networking expert and a computer expert. And so there's a certain amount on business to take this on and make it easy for them to do. But there are some simple things. So our small and medium business guidance does give some simple steps that we've written to be accessible. And I really did appreciate the comments about making the report accessible. We really are trying to write this for all Canadians for advice and guidance. For individual Canadians, though, we do publish tips. We try to put them out in ways that it's one simple action to take to make yourself more secure. So whether it's, today I'm gonna make a unique password for my bank. That immediately that means if it's not being reused, never reuse that password. You're raising the bar for your bank. There's something that's harder, but it's multi-factor authentication. So when you log into your bank, for example, turn it on, it means somebody else can't log in as you. Even if they get your password, there's another step to verify. That, again, makes it hard. So the cyber criminal is going to move on. And so essentially what we're talking about is we're putting hurdles in place that why would a cyber criminal want to jump over those when they'll move on to the next target who doesn't have the same hurdle in place? That only works for individuals. When we look at companies, and especially large organizations, though, sometimes they're worth the effort, and so they'll pay to invest to develop unique capabilities after them, and that's what we call big game hunting, where cyber criminals will target, and that's where a large organization though has the benefit of a larger budget and a larger cybersecurity organization, so they can bring in a really qualified provider to help them.
Thank you. Thank you for that. We've also heard about the impacts of COVID-19 has had in terms of foreign interference and cyber attacks during the pandemic, especially now that we're living in this virtual reality or virtual setting, I should say. I can see that growing with, when we have vaccines roll out and other things in place. What additional steps has the Cyber Center taken as a result of this pandemic, especially with the RCMP's Canadian Anti-Fraud Center?
So one of the things we've done, we started it early in the pandemic, was to simply work with providers and partners around the world and commercial providers to take down anybody that's impersonating the government of Canada. And so I think we've all gotten the calls pretending to be a government agency. The same thing happens on the internet. You would get emails, etc. So we've taken down over 4,000 of these since March. And so that was something that we did to try and decrease the amount of fraud that's happened. The second thing, though, that we've tried to also do is also raise awareness. So we did some joint public awareness campaigns with the RCMP and the Canadian Anti-Fraud Center to get information out to Canadians. Hey, look for this. Here's something we're seeing. And we've really tightened up the path of communications there in terms of making sure that information is being shared quickly and getting out to Canadians so they can know what to be aware of and what the latest scam is. The third piece, though, is we have been working with telecommunications companies as Canadians report spam. Anything that's related to the government of Canada, we've been proactively able to put in place things like, for example, the programs that the government has put in place in terms of like the CERB or some of the other response benefits, ensuring that we know what those look like ahead of time so that we can pre-position fraud detection. So if somebody tries to pretend to be the CERB site to get information, we have providers, commercial providers that are looking for that proactively to take it down before any Canadian is victimized. And so we're really trying to get ahead of the curve, and that's something where we've really relied on those government departments that are responsible for delivering to get that out there. And then finally, we're also telling everybody, go to the root of truth. If you're looking for the facts, go to the place to get the real facts. And in the pandemic situation. Ottawa Public Health for me, Ontario Public Health, and the Public Health Agency of Canada are those roots of truth for me. They'll obviously be different if you're wherever.
Thank you, Madame Cara. 5 minutes.
Thank
2.5 minutes, Madame Michaud.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Much as I would have liked to know a little bit more, as my colleague Mr. Motz would have liked to know about 5G and other things, I won't go there. I'm interested in helping my constituents, and I'm sure my colleagues have received as many emails as I have about citizens being concerned about 5G, mostly misunderstanding. We'd like to hear you talk about this. You say that the public shouldn't be worried, but I think there is a duty to inform, and I would like to hear you on that score. Thank you.
I'm not sure I understand the question. I didn't understand the question. I'm sorry.
Je peux reformuler
I would like to reformulate this. The threats 5G has for Canadians and Quebecers. How does that translate? We receive email from our constituents. They're worried, they're concerned about what that threat might be. So with a view to reassuring our constituents, we'd like to hear you talk about that threat. Thank you.
Well, okay. Thank you, and sorry for the trouble understanding. I think there are a few things I'd want to highlight. I think when we're looking at any new technology and new development that's out there, there is some misinformation around 5G, but I will set that aside. I'll really focus in on the security aspects of this. So what we're looking for is this is a network that can have many more devices that supports much faster communications, and has much higher bandwidth. So it's much faster, many more devices connected to it, and it's pretty much real time, which means you can do things over these types of networks. It's designed for that environment. So things like sending commands to self-driving cars. In general, the threats we look for are around the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of things like the network. So the network itself, can I communicate? And that's availability. And you really look for things like the robustness of the equipment. Do you have multiple providers? So that if one provider becomes unreliable, can you replace their equipment at some point with something else? And so that's around the availability side. And then we look at the integrity. So if I send a message over that network, will it get there in the form I deliver it? And that's where encryption is the key piece for integrity. If I want a message to be clearly delivered, I will send it in a way where it can't be modified. And that's what encryption gives us for integrity. And so you have things like, you might hear digital signatures, et cetera. What that does is it says this message cannot be modified now, and we do that through cryptography. And the last thing then is
unfortunately, I have to leave it there. Mr. Harris, 2.5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair. I do detect a little bit of victim blaming in some of the commentary and suggestions that are coming from some of your work. Obviously, people are not sophisticated in the use of this equipment. Is there any of these patchings of our systems that you're urging people to do? Can any of that be mandated by the government in terms of to the system providers or to the internet providers or to groups or manufacturers that would take away some of those even the simple steps and make people more secure?
Well, thank you for the question, and we certainly don't want to blame the victims on this because it is hard. I understand it's just keeping on top of all of this. The first thing we say is just turn on auto updates and slide on our phones. Just slide it to auto update for businesses as well as individual citizens. But the industry does need to make this easier, and in many cases they are. So our home laptops, our home computers, etc., tend to do this now. By default, you have to manually say, don't auto update, I will update it manually type of thing. And that's a good progress, but it needs to be made better. The real challenge is for businesses where the equipment doesn't do that. The equipment requires a system administrator to download a patch or an update, to go onto the device, to install it, to test it. And it may or may not work because the device really is finicky. And that's where the industry really does need to start stepping up on cybersecurity to make it easier for these small and medium organizations to stay up to date. But there is some hope. The cloud does offer some benefits to these organizations where updates are automatic. So the Cyber Center, one of the things we did when we stood it up was to move our operations into the cloud because we wanted to work like every business in Canada was working that day or was going to be working, live our own advice. And what we do is I get updates. In fact, I just saw my computer just told me I just got an update on my Microsoft Teams environment that we use to say, yes, you get the updates. So you get them right away when they're issued by the vendor. And so that makes it easier, and that takes the pressure off of those small and medium organizations to do things. And hopefully, and when you do that, that means you don't have to do it yourself. You don't have to go in and download the patches and install them because it comes with it. And so that's really where we're saying this has to be easier for the users, not placing the blame on them.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Harris. Mr. Van Popta, 5 minutes, please.
Good, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Jones, for being here with us today and for your insightful evidence. I have a question about universities and cyber threat relating to theft of intellectual property. Perhaps you could comment on that in the context, of course, that some research universities actually partner with foreign companies to help fund their universities or fund research.
Well, thank you for the question. I think one of the areas where we have been doing significant outreach, and we've been doing with our colleagues at the Canadian Security Intelligence Service, is really to help to inform universities of the threats they're facing, but also give them some practical advice. They are open research organizations, and they face a unique challenge in that in terms of cybersecurity. But one of the other areas where we've worked with is it's called CANARI. It's the Canadian Network for Research and Innovation. It's a not-for-profit organization, and we've been working with them on improving their cybersecurity as well, and trying to help them bolster that for all Canadian universities as well. So trying to take some practical steps to make it easier to protect intellectual property. At the end of the day, one of the things that organizations need to balance, and one of the things that I would rely on my colleagues at the service for, is really that in many cases, people just like to talk about the research that's going on and sharing it widely because they're really excited about their work. And that's one of those areas where I would look to the Canadian Security Intelligence Service to really provide the expertise on the insider threat. From our perspective, though, we are trying to bolster cybersecurity. We're doing it with partnership, and CANARI is the example in this case for the research access, but also reaching out to the universities in Canada to provide them with advice, guidance, but also realistic threat feeds that they should be expecting from cybersecurity to try to bolster it.
How significant a threat is it, in an economic measurement? How much value in intellectual property is being stolen from universities? Like how widespread is it?
I wish I had an answer to that question. I don't know. We don't, the way our mandate is structured, one of the things we don't do is collect information within Canada. So we rely on statistics, like, for example, like Statistics Canada or anything that's published by other organizations. And I haven't seen a figure that kind of monetizes the loss to Canadian institutions, both short and long term.
No, that's fair enough. Would a simple solution be for universities to quit partnering with foreign actors?
Well, I'm not an expert, and that's something that's probably best for some of the areas where they're used to these university partnerships. But I do know that one of the things that has been emphasized to me when we've been meeting with some of these organizations is that research is done globally, and partnerships are really important. And so all foreign partners, I'm not sure the universities would say they could sustain that. But I honestly, I think one of the things that we always say is for any organization, go in with your eyes wide open to the threat you're facing and what their goals are. Is it a mutually beneficial relationship, or is it about getting information out there? And that's really where the outreach that we've been doing with the service, I think, is hopefully improving that for Canadian universities.
Of course, in these comments about universities would also apply to companies. And just as you were talking, I had to think of the CanSino issue just recently, where it looks like some intellectual property around the COVID-19 vaccine may have walked out the back door, benefit of another country. But I have just a quick question. Well, the question is quick. I don't know about the answer, but the best and most efficient allocation of risk when it comes to cybercrime. You know, I'm thinking, for example, my relationship with my bank. It's very simple for me to change my password. You know, so maybe if some money is stolen out of my account, that risk should be completely mine and not the bank's. Or maybe the risk should be allocated to the software company that provides that interface. Do you have any sort of commentary about that allocation of risk?
That's a very profound question in terms of the allocation of risk. I think the banking example is an excellent one where not only do they have cybersecurity elements, but they also do have a substantial amount of anti-fraud. So if you see something that's out of character, it tends to trigger their fraud controls. And I've always been quite impressed. And you know, I think we've all fallen victim to something like a debit card skimming and things like that at some point. Hopefully nobody has, but you know, I had my debit card skimmed once. So I think there's some elements there. Risk is one of those areas where it's really about how to minimize the risk. And I'm not sure about risk transference. It's a challenging question. I think in that case, if the question would really be, are you doing something that's absolutely negligent or not? But again, that's probably a question that's best left to a lawyer and not to a cybersecurity engineer.
Thank you, Mr.
But it is something where.
Thank you, Mr. Van Pompt. And Mr. Van Pompt has actually anticipated a question I would like to ask, but maybe we get towards the end because I think it is a live issue. With that, it is Mr. Iacono. 5 minutes, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Jones, for being here with us today and enlightening us about what's going on in the world of technology. Personal information data. This is a concern for our constituents and, of course, for all Canadians. The concern related to a cyber attack and, of course, the data kept by commercial enterprises to do advertising and so forth. Could you tell us how we could help our citizens better protect their personal data? Thanks.
Well, thank you for that question. I think it really does go to the root of some of the things we talked about in the National Cyber Threat Assessment, and it's that the amount of personal data that's out there on us now is quite extensive. And some of the things we've seen, and it's one of the things we've and has been noted in any cyber attack, is that not only do they have things like our usernames and passwords that they've stolen from other places, but in many cases they also have the answers to our security questions: your mother's maiden name, your first pet, what school did you go to, things like that. And so those things that we always relied on as kind of a second barrier to security, it's now just the same as the password and type of thing. So it's something that's critical. One of the aspects that I always say to protect information is, why does somebody need to know this? Are they asking something that's legitimate? So if I'm going on and I'm buying an online purchase and they ask for my social insurance number, they don't need that for the purchase. I'm going to walk away. They need to start collecting the minimum amount of information viable. And the second thing is that I also think about, what risk am I taking on? So of course I do online shopping, not just because of the pandemic, but it's also convenient for me. Where's it going? Who's behind this service? How is it being using either a third-party payment system, things like that can protect you financially. But in reality, things like credit cards do have good protection. But really, it does boil down to, do they really need to know? Over-collecting of information is something that we certainly look at, even when we designed the cyber center and the call, when people can call, there's a phone number where people can call for help. We looked and said, what's the minimum information we absolutely need to be able to respond and help the person? And then we did a privacy assessment on that to protect it. That's something that I think every business should be looking at. Do I really need to know all of this? Do I really need to keep a history of every purchase they made? Or maybe I do. There could be a real reason for that. And that's something then I think the privacy commissioners have advice on, et cetera. But from a cybersecurity perspective, the more information we put out there, the more information we put on our social media accounts, the more vulnerable we're making ourselves because we're frankly giving them information they need to target us.
Merci. Cela fait maintenant plusieurs.
Thank you. For some years now, we've been aware of illegal transactions, activity on the dark web, for example, drug trafficking, prostitution, and weapons trafficking. Can you tell us whether it's possible to put means together to be able to trace these criminals?
Well, thanks for the question. I think it's one that investigators at the RCMP or other, perhaps the Sûreté de Québec, for example, might be in better position to answer in terms of investigation phase. But certainly one of the risks we do see is that the dark web is certainly facilitating cyber criminals and cybercrime tools. So there's an entire ecosystem that's out there where you can go on and you can say, I want a tool that's going to allow me to do this. I want to target this type of organization or this specific organization. And they'll bid and they'll tell you what it's going to cost. So you can pay for 24/7 support. You can pay for a custom tool to be developed for you to achieve your goals. And then the organized crime that goes behind all of that. It is a large enterprise that's out there, facilitated by the dark web and anonymous payment systems like Bitcoin and online currencies. And so that's one of the key challenges, that the entire system is designed to be anonymous, to not have attribution.
Parfait. Concernant
Specifically concerning tools for cyber attack, these are technological tools, so it'd be reasonable to understand that their manufacture is not easily accessible. Are you able to tell us today who the manufacturers are, and are we in a position to prevent them to sell these tools on Canadian soil? And are we sufficiently advanced to really even understand what exists out there in the marketplace that could come and harm us?
5 minutes, but it is an important question, and maybe you could circle back in on an answer. Mr. Kirk, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Jones. This is very enlightening and certainly an important subject, especially in the circumstances which we find ourselves in regarding COVID. I'd have a question, and I hope to get through a few questions, but are there any areas that Canada is at a higher risk or more susceptible due to the evolution in the use of internet since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic and the explosion of online capacity required to deal with the pandemic?
Well, that's there are a few areas where we would say we've got to be very careful about the increased risk. So one of the things is, with so many of us working from home, the fact is it's changed our our technology environment, and we're mostly working outside of our organization's perimeter. So a lot of the defenses that we relied upon, for many Canadians, they're now working from home, directly connecting to the internet. And so there are ways to try to minimize and mitigate those risks, and those are some of the things we published. But that's probably one of the biggest risks, the fact we're now outside of the defensive perimeter that was set up. And now in some cases we're not. So for example, I never leave our defensive perimeter because of the way we've set up our remote access. We designed this to work remotely, and that I could work from home and stay behind our full suite of cyber defenses. And in the majority of the government, it's like that. For a lot of organizations, though, one of the things we've encouraged them is to make sure that they're either doing something similar to the design we have for government, or supplementing with other defenses that are there. So that would be one of the major risks. But also then, we're holding more data at home. We're having conversations like this, although this is a public forum, and things like that, where we just need to be kind of conscious of what we're doing as well.
Thank you very much for that. So obviously, health infrastructure is at the front of everybody's mind. With the advent of COVID over the last 10 months or so, have we seen an increase in the threats faced by our healthcare systems, and how is your organization able to assist in ensuring that those briefings just don't get to the federal government, but that information is getting onto the ground to ensure that local hospitals, local clinics, doctors that are working from home, in many cases, Canadians that are video conferencing their doctors, that the whole system is protected?
Well, That's thanks for that question, because I think it really goes to some of the heart of what we've been doing, and the goal is not to have this information sitting inside of the federal government, but to get it out into the hands. So I mentioned earlier, I talked about the weekly call we do with the health sector, and that includes our provincial and territorial colleagues, but also any organizations that come to the table, and that grows every week as more and more people. It is just purely sign up for it, and we're happy to walk through what we're seeing on cybersecurity, including advice and guidance. In general, though, when we also see, and this is where we do leverage in terms of what our foreign intelligence mandate can tell us in terms of where targeting is happening, and we have gone out to specific organizations where we see things and given them tailored advice because they're a system of importance to the government. And so really it's about getting that information into the hands of somebody. Our goal is to get it before they're a victim, so they can proactively take steps to protect themselves. And that's what we do every week. And we do it consistently. And then, of course, we walk through, we publish a number of alerts and advisories that go to sectors. We published the threat assessment for the health sector, and we made that public. We sent it to the health sector ahead of time as well to say, this is what we're going to be saying, things you need to be aware of. And we're really trying to raise the knowledge of the sector, but also work with them on what solutions will work as well. And what our goal is to encourage them to share within the sector best practices.
I've got about a minute left, and I'm hoping to get in one last question. So I apologize. I don't mean to cut you off, but we are in what's been considered an infodemic. There's a ton of information, misinformation, and then a whole bunch that's somewhere in the middle. And I think that's what makes conspiracies believable, because there's always that little bit of truth. So I would ask specifically regarding the integrity of Canada's democracy. I'd ask for your comments on threats that Canadian democracy, elections, any infrastructure associated with that. I'd ask for your comments on that.
So really, we're talking about that's big. We're really talking about some of the things that we've highlighted in the threats to Canada's democratic processes, the first and the second report that we've issued, to really try and highlight some of those. And that is it remains a challenge now. I think the response isn't necessarily a cybersecurity response, and so you'll see Elections Canada stepping in about things that are disinformation. Yourselves face this as members of Parliament and candidates at some point, et cetera, and how to combat that. But it is one of those areas where, from a cybersecurity perspective, we are very limited in terms of what we can do, because it is frankly just bad information being posted somewhere, and we're not in a position to be the arbiters of truth. But it is something where we always are looking to say, number one, how do we bolster our cybersecurity? The report itself its goal was to debunk some of the threats and some of the misinformation that could be out there, to say, no, this is how democracies work. You can't go online and just change Canada's vote tallies. There's procedures in place, etc.
So we're going to have to leave it there, notwithstanding many efforts south of the border to change the vote tallies. Madame Demoff, 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Chair, and it's wonderful to have you here, Mr. Jones, and thank you for your work and for your report. It's really helpful, and you are presenting it in a way that Canadians can understand, because a lot of this is far beyond our knowledge, and it's important to simplify it so we know what we're talking about. Back in 2018, you had said that you were confident that sufficient safeguards existed to deal with the risks of telecommunications hacking or spying from China, but you acknowledged that risk could increase with the introduction of 5G. This week, Citizen Lab came out with a report. I don't know if you've seen it, but they said Canada's 5G strategy shouldn't be designed to solve a Huawei problem, but it should address a 5G problem to ensure resiliency and security. I'm wondering if you could maybe speak a little bit about that and what kind of strategy we should be looking at as we move and companies move to 5G.
Well, thanks for the question. I'll have to be careful just because the policy decision is still pending. But in general, what we're looking at when we're looking at anything approaching a 5G network, which is really that the system needs to be secured in layers. And so everything from how it's maintained, who's accessing it, the equipment itself, that there's variety, that the software that's used, whether it's open source, publicly scrutinizable, or closed, meaning it comes from a particular vendor, but then how we leverage it. And that's one of the things where modern telecommunications offer a significant advantage now. We used to rely on the network itself for security. And so the fact of how you transmitted, because encryption was something that just couldn't be used because it was too expensive. Our devices weren't fast enough to do it. Encryption now offers us, and it is a challenge when you talk at law enforcement context, but encryption offers us the protection of the privacy information in terms of what you're transmitting. So it's hard to observe. Encryption is now enabled more and more by default on our devices. In fact, the Government of Canada, for example, all our websites mandate that they're encrypted. And so encryption itself, so that's protecting confidentiality and the ability to know what I'm saying or what's happening. The second piece then is the integrity, knowing that when I send a message, nobody's modifying it. And that's one of the areas where we need to think about end to end. So for example, if the city is sending to facilitate an ambulance getting to the hospital and is changing the lights, you want to make sure that it's not sending green, where traffic will cross, things like that. So that's the integrity of the message, meaning that the message you wanted to send is getting there exactly as determined. And so you use encryption for that, but you don't really care if somebody sees the message, you just care that they can't change it. And then availability, we need the network to be there. And so that's where we really look at a robust strategy that's talking about vendors building better equipment, better software. How's it tested? It's international in scope to make sure that it meets minimum standards, but also that you have multiple vendors in place. We want a multi-vendor strategy. We want there to be diversity in the market. And these are things that we want in every section, regardless of what type of network or what type of equipment. We're always better off than when it's a monopoly. And so we really want to leverage all of those things. And that's really what I think the Citizen Lab report was getting at. It said it's multifaceted. There's not one solution to the challenge we face. You need to apply multiple different aspects of security, and that's certainly what we try to layer into any security program we do. It's not unique to the next generation mobile networks versus a fixed network or anything that's, for example, the incredibly high-speed network I have at home right now. We use the same security modeling for that.
Just quickly, because I only have a minute. Canadians had expressed concerns about the COVID app and their lack of, giving away their privacy, which we know is not the case. And yet the same people will upload a photo of themselves to an app that will automatically age their face without even thinking that all of that was going to a Russian company. How do we get past that? You see it on social media all the time where people are providing access to photos and private information. Let's share personal information that ends up being used for security questions, and you answer them openly on Facebook. How do we educate Canadians about that?
It's certainly a challenge, and I wish I had an answer to that question, because it's certainly one of the challenges we face. I know one of the COVID alert was one of the was a frustrating a little bit experience because of that exact concern. Because from my perspective, the application was built in the open. We tested it with commercial providers to make sure that we'd done everything we can to test for vulnerabilities or just coding errors. It was open sourced. Privacy commissioners reviewed it, but still it persists. And it's something that just comes with, well, it's the government. It's a cartoon that I saw, and it was 1950s saying, "I can't talk, the government might be listening on the phone." And then it was now, and you say, "Hey, listening device," which is one of those home speakers we have, tell me what I'm doing, and it's recording everything we're saying. It's just this dichotomy that's out there where people I wish I had a great answer.
Who knew that Siri was out there in 1950? Okay. Madame Michaud, 2.5 minutes, please.
Président, je remercie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would like to thank Ms. Dema for her question. The answer is also very interesting. I'm particularly interested in the working group that was struck and the center belonged to during the federal elections to prevent foreign interference. And it's a concern. Everything I saw on the TV with the social dilemma, I don't know if you've seen that, serious, but it's very worrisome. What came out of that working group in terms of specific measures for foreign interference or disinformation during elections, be they municipal, provincial, federal, whatever? Are there specific recommendations that were issued following that group's work? Thank you.
Well, thanks for the question. I'm just going to assume that you're talking about the work of the Security Intelligence Threats to the Election Task Force that CSE was chaired on behalf of the community, and I think so. There was a few things that we're doing. So there was work that we did with Elections Canada, supporting them overall on cybersecurity. I can go into a lot of detail on that, but so could the Chief Electoral Officer and his team. One of the aspects for us was also making sure that every registered political party who wanted to was getting regular cyber briefings. My team did that on an ongoing basis throughout the campaign to make sure that any cyber threats that we were seeing were shared, but also contextualized to say this is really important. This is what you could be expecting to see. That tended to be with the officials inside of the party, but then we also had the hotline set up where political parties could call if they needed assistance with something, for example, fake social media accounts, etc. And most of the social media providers were fairly responsive to those types of things, and we would try to ensure that connections were made there. But it does remain a challenge, and that's one of the areas where we are always looking for ways to connect. On the other hand, one of the things that has been repeatedly reinforced to me is that if, for example, you are impersonated on social media, I cannot make a complaint on your behalf. You have to do that, and the social media companies are quite adamant about that. So it's one of the areas where we try to facilitate and hopefully accelerate getting resolution if there's something like that does happen. And we did see some incidents like that where parties asked for some support. But other than that, I think those are. And then of course, then the report itself, the threats to Canada's democratic processes 1 and 2, to really try and lay the groundwork to say, here's what we expect to see on cyber threats, to Canada's democratic process.
We showed Mr. Harris 2.5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair. And Mr. Jones, could you tell us what's the interface or the difference between cyber defense and cyber security? We know you report, or the agency reports to the Minister of Defense, but as my recollection as defense critic, I don't think you're a part of the department. And the military, of course, has to protect its own infrastructure and equipment and communications and all of that. But is your agency involved in defense planning in any way? You talked about tabletop exercises with the electrical power grid people, but do you engage in these kind of exercises with the department, with the military, in terms of defense planning, or in terms of scenarios planning for military activity?
Thanks for the question. So we are part of the Department of Defense, and we report to the Minister. We report to the Minister, but we are a separate agency under Defense. I almost slipped back 7 years there for a second. We do, but we are, so cyber defense for us, we're really talking about when you're actively doing something to prevent a cybersecurity incident. So you're taking a block. So we are the cyber defenders of the Government of Canada. We take over 2 billion actions a day, over and above those that are available commercially to protect the Government of Canada. And so we have a cyber defense part of our program. Cybersecurity is the broader term that we use, and that's also about the proactive measures. So rather than just taking action at the point of compromise, building those defenses and building it to be secure from the start. So security by design. And so that's really where, in my mind, we differentiate cybersecurity from cyber defense. Cyber defense really is about that action you take to protect. Our work with the Department of Defense is obviously, they are responsible for the defense of their systems, and they're the experts on military equipment, but we do provide a number of services. One would be cryptography and the encryption systems that they use to protect all Canadian Forces operations. That's a 70-year partnership where we worked with them on those types of things. But also on any exercise planning, we certainly work with Defense. But we would also do that with any other organization as well, to say, how do we respond to any cybersecurity incident, and really look for opportunities to raise that bar up proactively. And we would do that as part of our mandate.
Thank you.
And then finally,
thank you, Mr. Harris. Sorry, I cut you off a little early. Did you want to just complete that sentence? Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to say finally, part of the CSE Act is defensive cyber operations. and foreign cyber operations to be able to take action when Canada is threatened, and with the authorization and or the acknowledgement of the Minister of Foreign Affairs and the Minister of Defence to say we need to take action in foreign space to protect Canada as well. That's part of the CSE Act that Parliament passed.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. Earlier in your answer, you said something like, I thought you said 2 billion attacks a day. 2 billion. That's
2 billion. We take 2 billion actions, 2 billion with a B actions per day to prevent some malicious activity. Some of it is scanning the government, looking for vulnerabilities. Others are malware that is attempting to be downloaded.
Really? That seems like a lot of attacks.
Well, some of it is bulk scanning, so it's kind of like somebody's going to every government computer and rattling the doors, checking the windows to see if we left anything unlocked, and so we stop that. So if you can't see our vulnerabilities, you can't exploit them.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Kirk, 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So it's been a topic of some debate in Canadian politics as of late, and brought on by a fairly explosive New York Times editorial regarding MindGeek and the abusive videos on the site Pornhub and other things. Just wondering if you have any comments about how we can ensure that victims of some of these terrible crimes, whether it be child pornography or rape, these terrible things, what can be done to ensure, and I'd love to hear the practical solutions, the recommendations you would have to ensure that this practice can be stopped.
It's a disturbing question just because of the material, but it's a deep question as well. I think the broader answer would be best positioned to come from my colleagues at Public Safety Canada, who really are looking at the online harms aspect and seeing how to reduce that. Some of the cybersecurity elements we try to emphasize is to try to hopefully help people never let themselves be in a position to be exploited in that way, or to prevent their kids from being exploited in those ways, and some of the techniques and some of the tools. And that's really one of the challenges. I think one of the other areas that is a big challenge, though, is these platforms are designed to be barrier free in a lot of cases. And so one of the famous, again from the New York Times actually, internet memes is, on the internet nobody knows you're a dog. And so because if you're so anonymous, you have no clue who's behind that. And that's one of the things where with online harms, how do you balance the fact that who's interacting with kids, who's interacting with me online, et cetera. And so you can be anonymous, and that enables a lot of activity. And so, but the broader answer to some of those questions is probably best positioned from Public Safety Canada. From a cybersecurity element, though, hopefully we're going to give some tips. We continue to give tips to help people keep their kids safe, but keep themselves safe online too.
And I appreciate that. And certainly there's a prevention part, and then there's a cybercrime part, and then there's a whole bunch of other aspects of that need to be addressed. So one of the concerns, and this goes back to kind of the conversation around information and misinformation, but foreign state directed editorials, advertorials, the threatening of or the influence of whether it be cultural groups, whatever the case is in Canada, the foreign state actors using online presence to try and direct influence within Canada. I'm wondering if you could comment on that and anything that can be done to help ensure that there's integrity in that side of things.
I really wish my colleagues from the Canadian Security Intelligence Service were here to take the lead on this. From our perspective, in the cybersecurity realm, it's really our challenge really is trying to inform people in the National Cyber Threat Assessment to say, hey, look for factual information. The internet is designed to be open and free, and to allow this type of communication. And so, from my perspective as the kind of cybersecurity agency, the advice I have is really to, look with a wary eye, and not trust what you're just finding online. On the other hand, I think they're probably better, them or Public Safety Canada are probably better positioned to really talk about some of the actions that can be taken. From my perspective, it looks and it is legitimate internet traffic, but we don't like. I don't mean to legitimize it, but
yeah.
I'm trying to say it doesn't look like it's not a malicious cyber activity. It's not malware or some other aspect like that where it's trying to exploit the technical aspects of cybersecurity.
No, that's fair. So I guess my final question would be, we talk a lot about the cloud and how that actually provides a certain a level of security that would not have been accessible as of late, because you don't have to have servers and between the physical locked door and the various layers of cybersecurity to ensure that could be safe. With the cloud, obviously it's somebody else's responsibility, but one of the further challenges to that is that you have a massive system that holds an unbelievable amount of data, which then, although there's a greater level of security, there's risks associated with that on a much larger scale, although much more difficult to infiltrate. I'm wondering if you could comment as to how those risks are mitigated, because that especially impacts small and medium-sized enterprises who will purchase that cloud storage option for $20 a month or $50 a month, and it gives them access to the services, but the scale challenges exist there as well.
Unfortunately, Mr. Kirk has gone way over his allocated time. If you could work your answer in some another way. Madame Labropoulos, are you up for a 5-minute question, please?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Merci beaucoup, Mr. Jones, pour...
Thank you very much, Mr. Jones, for being here with us. I have 2 questions. With all of the trade agreements we've signed in the last 5 years, more and more Canadian companies are doing business on the world market. This is excellent for the Canadian market and it benefits companies. But in your assessment, you state that online espionage threat is increased for those Canadian businesses that do business abroad or with state-held companies. You have talked a little bit about this topic, and you've given suggestions on how Canadians can protect themselves and how Canadian companies can protect themselves. Do you have any advice for companies that are in direct contact with foreign actors and in cases where there can be cyber threats? Thank you.
Great, and thank you for that question. I think it's there are risks, and it depends on which country we're looking at. So specifically, we talked about state-owned enterprises and partnering with those. So some of the things, and this is where I think, depending on the Canadian business, there's quite a lot of advice out there, and it's understanding what the goal of the partnership agreement is. Is it a technology transfer agreement where it really is looking to transfer the technology to build, or is it about manufacturing and you're outsourcing something? Knowing what's important to you as a company is the first step. What makes me special? What's my special information? So is that intellectual property, some unique manufacturing process, tool, technique, design, or is it my customer base, how I interact with them, how I promote, etc.? And knowing what makes you special and unique is then you know what you need to protect. That's the goal that you need to protect. And then you go in with your eyes wide open. What's of interest to me? Is this a mutually beneficial relationship, and starting to assess it? And then that tells you where you need to put your cyber defenses, which ultimately gets to what I'm responsible for. And that would be, are you positioning your company for a takeover? In which case you could expect to see a company somebody looking to do get information on your financials. Where are you particularly vulnerable? Who are your suppliers, your legal counsel, etc. And you could see that in terms of a takeover bid. Or if you're looking at, you have a very unique piece of technology, then you need to protect that. So how am I protecting it and making sure that it isn't going places where it walks out the door, and really thinking that through and thinking through the threats. And then leveraging the advice that's out there.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And on an unrelated note, I'd like to thank my colleague, Mr. Keurig, for bringing this one up. MindGeek is actually about a 15-minute drive from my house. It's something that hits close to home, the fact that it's actually taking place and that these videos are being put up from a place so close to home. What recommendations do you think would you give the government of Canada in order to ensure that children are not being exploited in the way that they already are? I know that you said public safety is already working on this, but if you can give us any insights as to what can be done and what can be enforced at the government level.
Well, I think the challenge I really face here is that really from a cybersecurity perspective, my advice would really be to the potential victims and how to protect things and protect themselves, and to try to keep themselves from getting into that situation. And so really thinking before you share information, once it's on the internet, it's there forever. How are you sharing it? What apps are you using? The example was used about kind of the face apps and aging, but similarly photo sharing, etc., and not placing oneself in a position where you're vulnerable to that type of harm. The next would be Canadians thinking about how are they using the technology base, and saying, is this really, and understanding the harms that they can get themselves into by slowly being drawn in, and then minimizing harms and dealing with it. I really do think it's I'm just not positioned well to talk about the different tools that are placed, because that wouldn't be something that we would be doing from a cybersecurity perspective. It's certainly something as a citizen I would love to see dealt with harshly and resolved and dealt with quickly, but it's not something that we're in a position to really talk about from cybersecurity perspective.
Thank you, Madame Labro. Gosh, I'm going to get this. We have gone through 3 rounds, colleagues. We still have 20 minutes left. I believe the Conservatives want Madame Stubbs to be next, but before we get to that round, the chair has a couple of questions that he would like to ask, and maybe the Liberals could indicate to the clerk who they would like to have. So I'm proposing 5 minutes to the Conservatives and the Liberals, and then 2.5 to the NDP and the Bloc, and then a further 5 minutes, and that should take us to so two for the Liberals, 2 for the Conservatives. So if you could indicate to me who you want to be the questioners. So I want to circle back on Mr. Van Popta's question, and that is the allocation of risk. A couple of years ago, we had Desjardins here to talk about a data breach, and it was based upon what they called a rogue employee. And what I didn't understand was how a customer of Desjardins would be put at substantial risk of their data going into the dark web, and yet apparently Desjardins had no liability for any harm that would happen to one of its customers. And I just wonder, in the context of your cybersecurity center, whether that has been a discussion, and if so, where you think that discussion is going.
Well, that's a interesting question. I think we're faced with the challenge that insider threat, which really what we're talking about there is something that kind of hits multiple different facets. One is they're in a position of trust, so you do have access to types of data and information that's there, especially if it's related to your position. And then what controls do you put in place from a security perspective, an information security perspective? So that's understanding. One of the things we say in our top 10 is to segment and separate information. So there are things at CSE that I just don't need to know. Yes, I'm one of the senior executives there, but that doesn't mean I need to know everything. I don't have access to security files. For security clearances, I don't need to know, I don't need to access it. We segment information away, and we protect it. That's for privacy reasons, but it's also for security reasons. And we even in the cyber center, there are things where there's a limited group of people who have exposure to certain information, and we do that deliberately to protect it. And so those are some of the cybersecurity elements that we would say as part of our general advice and guidance. But you first have to know what needs to be protected, and that's one of the things, and what could be used against it. A lot of times what I say to businesses is, don't think about the harm that it could cause to you. Think of the harm somebody could do with the information that you have. Who could they give it to that would harm you?
Shouldn't Mr. Jones, shouldn't the onus be on the financial institution? The financial institution has a lot more resources available to it to protect me than I have to protect me. And what I don't understand is why that liability shift shouldn't be on the onus. The onus shouldn't be on the financial service provider.
Well, I fear if I that's a question that gets me into legal territory for which I'm wholly unqualified.
Well,
to
I was
respond to.
inviting you to jump off the cliff there, but it is something that's irritated me for a while now. And the second question has to do with passwords, and you're right to argue for passwords. But what I don't understand is why all Canadians, when accessing their bank accounts, don't just simply have facial recognition technology. Isn't that the ultimate protection for passwords?
Well, that's a great question, because it's something that we face in the government all the time, and it comes down to really accessibility. Does every Canadian have the technology necessary to access using facial recognition? It's not foolproof. It is one factor. So we always say there's kind of the three factors: something you know, a password, something you know, something you are, which would be, facial recognition is good, fingerprint is another example, and then something you have. So I always think when I walk into the building at CSE, something I know is my PIN code to get in, something I have is my badge, and something I am is my photo and my face that our security guards check as I pass through the different gates. And so those are kind of the physical world example of what's there. So yes, that would add another factor. Passwords would be something you know, something you have. There's things like hardware tokens, but those are, again, about accessibility. And so it really is about finding that balance. But it does add a factor of authentication.
In the scaling of security, surely to goodness, facial or thumbprint recognition technology is far more secure than whether my password is 123 or 321.
And absolutely, it's a much higher hurdle to jump over than if you have a simple password or you reuse your password, or it's an easily guessed password type of thing.
Okay. My final question, and I'm really straining the patience of my colleagues, but who cares? The final question is it has to do with an example of a friend of mine who is make commentary on one of the questions, on several of the questions, companies that several of the countries that you have named, and has legitimate fear about his about threats, both cyber and other, and he is a member of a diaspora community. And when he took the threat to the local police force, they said, no, that's an RCMP matter. And then when he took it up to the RCMP, then they said, no, that's a CSIS matter. And when he tried to take it to CSIS matter, there was dead silence on the other end. I think that one of the reasons that the diaspora community doesn't report all of the threats that are there is that there's no clear way in which a report such as that can be reported. Do you have advice for my friend and for Canadians generally who are actually threatened by foreign state actors, both on a cyber basis and in a physical basis?
I think I'll have to stick to the cyber advice, which would be our expertise. So the first thing is if you do see something, whether it's a text message that seems to be spam, email, reporting that, and there's various ways to do it to your service providers. If you fill in 7726, or that spells spam on your phone, and you send your spam text messages there, that goes in and they deal with those. And in some cases, they do share that information out. Certainly, if people are seeing malicious emails that are threatening, et cetera, or that contain malware or look suspicious, there are ways to submit that in safe ways. But people tend not to do those, but there are ways to do it. First thing would be make sure that your systems are always up to date. If you feel that you're under threat from cybersecurity, The biggest vulnerability is the system being out of date or unpatched, depending on if I slip into techie terms.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Jones. I'm going to have to end it there, or else I'll be facing impeachment by my colleagues. Oh, it's nice to have some music, yes. Okay, we're having a breach of our own security here.
I'm voting for impeachment, Chair.
Yeah. And that's how you're announcing my impeachment, are you? With that, Madame Stubbs, 5 minutes, please.
Thanks, Chair. I think your last question was actually extremely important. And if you don't mind, I have questions on 2 topics. And if there's still time, if you'd be amenable, I think my colleague Takeo might have a question that I could split my time with, if that's possible.
Anything is possible.
Okay, thanks, Chair. Mr. Jones, you did identify China, Russia, North Korea, and Iran as threats to Canada. And I'm sure that you probably know that recently Israeli and US researchers found that China was rerouting internet traffic through state-controlled services. I just wonder if you would comment on whether or not and if you can, whether or not you think that's espionage or theft of intellectual property, what the purpose would be, and also if CSE has acted or what action CSE has taken to stop China from rerouting Canadian internet traffic.
Well, thanks for the question. There's a little bit of some of that might touch on some classified issues, but I can certainly talk about it I'm hoping I can answer your question fully. There's a few things I think typically what we're talking about here is the way the internet routes itself is you can pretend to be it works on what's the cheapest route, usually meaning fastest, and you can pretend to be the cheapest route and fastest, so it forces the internet to direct across. And a technique for that is called BGP hijacking, but I won't go into all the techie grossness of it. And so that's one of the things that actually we've been working in partnership. I talked about innovation before, and we do look at ways to innovate and to work with our telcos to detect this type of activity. And moreover, to say what are the defensive ways we can do things on to prevent this. It isn't something that happens a lot, but it is something that can happen, and it's something that we're looking for, and we're looking for ways to mitigate and to defend against it. At the same time, though, not tamper with not reduce the reliability of the internet. It is something where you're talking about big shifts, and so it is a bit of a concern. But what it is really you're talking about being able to kind of mass all of the data that's going from one place to another, and so encryption is a great defense against that. So the fact that our apps, like right now, we are on an encrypted Zoom channel. It's not being publicly. You can't publicly just tap into this. You have to be able to sign in, etc. There's encryption there. When I send a message over any of the messaging apps, etc., that's encrypted. So the encryption and our websites are all encrypted now as well for the government. A lot of, hopefully, more and more of commercial sites are fully encrypted. And so that immediately puts a barrier to actually using that information for anything other than getting a whole bunch of encrypted data that you can't do anything with.
Okay.
So those are some of the defenses.
Thank you. Thank you. And just related to a topic we had touched on earlier, I do note that our government's critical infrastructure strategy hasn't been updated since 2009. And so just relative to this potential ransomware targeting of large enterprises and critical infrastructure, I just wonder if you can expand, like in more specifics and more detail about the nature or the depth of the relationships that you have built with operators of critical infrastructure, those in the private sector, and if there are established relationships with those in power to make decisions in those organizations in an efficient way.
Yeah, that's so absolutely. Now we started with the telecommunications sector. That was something where we see from cybersecurity perspective, they're kind of the root of so much. But then we've expanded that into the energy sector, particularly concentrating on the electrical sector from coast to coast. And so we do have partners that we're working with and contacts at absolutely the senior levels of the companies there. We always look to grow those partnerships, and we're looking for, like I just described the work we did with the telecommunications companies. We're looking at doing something similar with electrical. with the electrical companies about some of the threats they're facing in terms of research development, co-development, where they invest with us in how to combat this. And one of the criteria we say is, well, as we learn things, it has to be shared with everybody in the sector. So every Canadian company working, if we work with one specific company, what we are very conscious is never to create a competitive advantage for them. We want to make sure that it's going to the whole sector. We're the government. Our goal is to make sure it's coast to coast to coast, but also that it's shared openly so that we can all benefit from it, no matter where you are. And so there are companies that are bigger in Canada and they have more resources. And we've seen them step up, and we've seen their senior executives step up. We work with them. I have fairly regular meetings with senior executives from the energy companies, for example, but also from the telcos, just to make sure that we're on track and we're addressing the biggest threats. And they have a very good understanding of risk. So that's something that's growing, but it still needs to grow. To your point, critical infrastructure is large. There's a number of providers. It is very disparate in Canada. And so we are looking for some leaders, but also for organizations like industry associations to bring all of their members to the table. And
okay, we're gonna have to leave it there, Ms. Stubbs. Who is the next Liberal questioner? Madame Cara.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Thanks again, Mr. Jones. I represent a riding in Brampton West, and you may know, or may not know, back in 2019, we worked really closely with Ryerson University to be a partner to secure a cyber secure catalyst with Ryerson University, which was part of it was funding through the Canadian government as well. And it's a National Center for Innovation and Cybersecurity in Brampton. The catalyst drives collaboration to empower businesses and to look at, to tackle some of the very things that you're talking about of innovations and get them how to tackle these issues. Wanted to know if you know about them, and wanted to know if there's any opportunities for partnership or collaboration with this catalyst.
Well, absolutely, we know about them. It's always good to see any organization stand up. We never claim to have a monopoly on innovation or on addressing this problem. We try to come humbly to the table with our knowledge, knowing that others have expertise. And we'll come at the problem from a different perspective. So there's always opportunity. We are trying to be more, put out some of our challenges. So we've done them through research challenges. CSE has published those. We work with the NRC to publish some of our research challenges for kind of the more R than the development pieces. But then we also have events where we hosted something called Geek Week in October, which was organizations can come and apply. It was virtual this year, of course. Normally it's in person. And it's over 200 cybersecurity professionals from Canada, academia, industry, government, and international who come together and start to tackle those problems together. And that would be another area where we could contribute and collaborate on research projects. And finally, we're always open to good ideas. I have a partnerships group that looks for places where we can work on things like collaborative cyber defense together. So we're always looking for great ideas and hearing what people have to say.
That's great. Thank you for that. And perhaps you can talk a little bit about, the fact that your agency is relatively new, having come into force in 2018. Can you perhaps talk a little bit about what the approach was to addressing and raising awareness for cyber threats before 2018? Where were some of the limitations and the successes of this approach in working and to prevent and address cyber attacks?
It's going to come across as a little bragging. So these organizations all existed. So Public Safety Canada, for example, had the Get Cyber Safe campaign ahead of time. CSE, we've had the IT security branch since the late 40s, early 50s, primarily based on cryptography, but growing into cybersecurity. So, and then of course, Shared Services Canada had the security operations. And so we brought those all together because we said we need to start addressing this whole economy thing. So some of the things we've done is it's really about that collaborative approach with industry and partnerships, saying that we're coming, it's not we're the federal government and we're here to help. It's we're the federal government, we want to work with you because you have knowledge and expertise as well. The second thing is we've tried to make our advice and guidance practical. So that's small and medium enterprises guidance, but all of our guidance is being rewritten to say realistically, what should a normal Canadian do, not a computer scientist with a PhD. We wrote our advice and guidance to be almost inaccessible. It's now accessible, and I was really pleased to hear all the comments on the report, and I really appreciate the feedback that it was accessible. And because it was written for every one of us to be able to read. And then I think the third is that we have done a lot on collaborative cyber defense to start working with industry partners to say, let's solve this problem together. We bring certain expertise to the table. The government of Canada has very good defenses in place that we've built over the last decade. How can we apply those lessons learned? Canadian Shield is an example of that with the Canadian Internet Registration Authority, but we do things with our telecommunications companies, critical infrastructure providers, and saying, let's come together. And of course, the provinces and territories. That's an area where we're still developing our relationships, but we've certainly seen various provinces come to the table and say, hey, let's work together. I can't think of a province or a territory where we don't have some relationship ongoing right now. And that's been one of the goals, is to really make sure that it's a pan-Canadian approach.
Thank you for that. Do I have any more time,
You have
Mr. Chair?
30 seconds.
I'll give that to my friend, Ms. Damoff.
Thanks, Kamal. My question's really simple, and it's just a yes or no answer. Is the COVID app safe?
Yes.
Okay.
All right.
There we are. You still got 15 seconds.
Thank you.
Yeah. Madame Michaud, 2.5 minutes, s'il vous plaît.
Merci, Monsieur le Président, et je vais...
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would like to end with a question that might not be as simple as the last one, but I'll give you all the time you need to answer it. If right now the government does not take any specific measures to counter cyber threats to protect the public, companies, and even governmental infrastructure, would that represent a danger for our democracy? And what are the measures that should be taken? Because it appears there should be shared responsibility between individuals, companies, but also the government. And what are your expectations with regard to the publication of the report? You're a young organization, but what measures do you think should be taken in specifically? Thank you.
Great. I think there's a few things. I think we are taking quite a bit of action to try to raise that bar on cybersecurity. Some of them very public and some of them private. So we are doing things. We have things that we call strategic mitigation plans, which are to directly address the threats that are mentioned in the report. One on cybercrime, one on protecting critical infrastructure. Defending democracy was the first one. And then beyond that is then operations plan and then actual operations, which could involve defensive cyber operations to protect and take action if we need to. And so that's really leveraging the mandate that Parliament has given us as part of the CSE Act and making sure that we're doing it in a holistic way. The second piece, though, for us is that to make sure that we're also getting practical information out to folks and working with them so that they can take action on their own. And that's what the report was about. It was to say, these are the threats we're facing. And so for Canadians, what I would hope, if Canadians read the report, I'd be thrilled. But if what Canadians could do is take some of those basic actions, follow Get Cyber Safe, and look for it. If you're a small and medium organization, read our advice on small and medium organization guidance, and make sure that take a look at it and say, am I addressing my cyber risks? And then that goes to Cybersecure Canada, which is a program that Innovation, Science, and Economic Development launched, which is something that they can leverage to say, hey, I've done these things, I've got a cybersecurity check mark. And that's something that I would like to see us use as a bit of a measure for Canadian companies, as a bit of a competitive advantage. They have this check mark, they've done this. So those are things that could be done directly from the report. Understand the threat, know where you're at risk, and then take action to reduce that. And we've got a lot of information out there to hopefully to empower Canadians to make those choices.
Sort of like an ISO marking for a company. Is that what you got in mind?
It's a program that's in place now. It is it could be looked at that way, but at a rate that's affordable for a small and medium organization to attain.
Okay.
The ISO standards tend to be unaffordable for other than the largest.
Okay. Mr. Harris, 2.5 minutes.
Thank you. More like an organic gardening check mark. Okay, thank you, Mr. Jones. I have a question coming out of a recommendation of this committee in 2019 on looking into cybersecurity in the financial sector. as a national security issue. And recommendation number 9 says the committee recommends the government of Canada explore ways to ensure all sensitive data moved within Canada as a domestically routed path, ensuring data packets are not exposed to foreign network infrastructure. Now my question really is, what has Canada done to act on that recommendation in the last, well, it was only in the last year or so, but you did mention encryption as one protection. Are there other things that Canada should be doing? And I'm thinking of this in the context of a recent sale of a company in my riding called Verafin for a whopping $2.75 billion to NASDAQ Inc. And they look after the FinTrack tracking of banks and financial institutions' obligations. In that context, how do we have sensitive data with a domestically routed route in order to not expose it to foreign network infrastructure?
Well, thanks for that. That's actually an issue that's near and dear to my heart. So one of the things that we face in Canadian telecommunications infrastructure, and some more detail could probably be provided by my colleagues at Innovation, Science and Economic Development, is that our infrastructure tends to run north-south because of the way the internet and the way the interconnections happen. And so we tend to connect to our American neighbors quite extensively, whereas the east to west connections are quite thin. That is something where we have seen some investment. And so the capacity to simply route across Canada might not be there. That's something that they'd be better positioned to face. And so we really say, how do we protect this no matter where it routes? One of the fundamental things with the internet is I could be sending you an email right now, and it could go all the way around the world to get to you in your routing. It doesn't necessarily stay within Canada just because of the way the internet works. It routes anywhere. And so we always say you need to take protections. And so that's encryption is the best protection for that. It does prevent the compromise of confidentiality. But in reality, there are some things around the internet infrastructure that certainly would be would make cybersecurity from a sovereignty perspective, but also from a reliability perspective, would be something that we would be interested in seeing, but it is a tremendous amount of investment from the private sector required, and Innovations in Science and Economic Development would probably be better positioned to answer that question.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Harris.
Thank you.
We are technically past 5:30, but we are not being pressed by anybody, and I had thought we had 2 questions that still to be, one liberal, one conservative. Do you want us to go past 5:30, or do you want to end it there? What does this mean? End it here?
It was a great question.
What's that?
I think we can end, Chair.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, you're going to have to save that great question. Mr. Jones, I think on behalf of the committee, I think I'm going to thank you, but your response and your report is in an accessible way, which I think is 90% of the ball game, just to be able to explain how vulnerable we are, both as on a personal level, but also as a nation, and all of the threats that appear there. So your security analysis has been very helpful to us, and we appreciate you coming. And I anticipate that we will be inviting you back. So with that, thank you, colleagues. And just before I bring the gavel down, we have no indication from anybody at this point as to whether we'll be able to meet next week. So stay tuned. Thanks again. Meeting adjourned.